Welcome to today's deep dive. We are incredibly glad you're joining us for this one.
Yeah, really glad you're here with us.
We're looking at a comprehensive document today. It's simply titled 013 Discernment and Obedience.pdf. And the mission for this deep dive, the whole goal here, is to really explore the intersection of spiritual discernment and, actionable obedience.
Right. Putting it into practice.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, who might be trying to navigate like a complex life choice right now. Maybe it's a career pivot or a shift in a relationship, or you're just trying to overhaul your daily habits. This dive is going to help you navigate that tension.
That tension of just knowing what to do.
Yeah, we are looking at that really profound question. Is this God's voice guiding me? Or just my own thoughts, anxieties, and desires kind of echoing back at me? Okay, let's unpack this, because that quiet question surfaces in almost every believer's life at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really the defining challenge of spiritual maturity, because people so often go into this expecting divine guidance to be like the cinematic burning bush kind of moment.
Right, the parting clouds.
Yeah, we want the clouds to part. We want an undeniable, thunderous voice to just drop a step-by-step roadmap right into our laps. But if you look at the historical biblical patterns, take the story of the prophet Elijah, for example. God usually speaks in a gentle whisper.
A gentle whisper.
Right. He rarely overwhelms us with some massive spectacle. Instead, he communicates in a way that requires us to lean in, and that actually cultivates attentiveness, which builds a deeper relationship over time.
But leaning in and cultivating that attentiveness feels nearly impossible today. I mean, we are living in a world completely saturated with noise.
Oh, the noise is constant.
It is. Your phone is constantly buzzing. You have all these social expectations, digital algorithms that are quite literally designed to hold your attention, and cultural pressures. And of course, your own internal ambitions just screaming at you. Trying to distinguish a gentle whisper in the middle of a crowded stadium is a tall order.
It's a very tall order, which is exactly why people tend to fall into two very dangerous, completely opposite extremes when they are, seeking direction. The first trap is paralyzing skepticism.
But wait, isn't waiting for a completely clear, undeniable sign just being prudent?
Well,
We're taught to be careful.
sure, but there is a massive difference between prudence and paralyzing skepticism. This extreme is when someone waits endlessly for a 100% logically bulletproof supernatural sign before making any move at all.
I see.
And if we dig into the psychology of why we do this, it's usually rooted in a fear of accountability. We want God to forcefully remove all uncertainty and sign the dotted line so that if things get difficult, we don't have to take the blame.
Wow.
But the result of that excessive hesitation isn't safety. It's just spiritual stagnation. You just end up standing still forever.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You were essentially demanding that God act like an insurance policy before you take a single step of faith.
Exactly.
And then, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, we have the second error, which the text calls impulsive spiritualization.
Right. Impulsive spiritualization.
Mhm.
This is assuming that every single strong emotion or sudden thought or gut feeling you have is divine guidance. And it happens all the time.
Oh, absolutely. This is where you see people weaponizing phrases like, God told me, or I just feel led, to justify something they already wanted to do anyway.
Yes, the built-in justification.
It is so much easier to say, well, God is closing this door, than to just admit, I am rage quitting my job because my boss is annoying. Or, someone claiming God told them to buy a brand new sports car. It sounds spiritual, but it's baptized impulsivity.
Baptized impulsivity. That is a perfect way to put it. Without careful, honest evaluation, it becomes dangerously easy to confuse our own impulses with divine inspiration. We suffer from confirmation bias. We hear exactly what we want to hear.
Right.
So the solution sits right in the tension between those two extremes. True discernment is a cultivated sensitivity. It is a relational discipline. It develops gradually through an ongoing walk with God where you learn the character and the tone of his voice over time.
Like recognizing a friend's voice.
Very much like that. It's like how you can pick out the voice of your best friend in a crowded room without even seeing their face.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We actually have a primary biblical case study to show exactly what this cultivated sensitivity looks like when it is put to the test. It's from the book of Acts, chapter 8, focusing on Philip.
The Philip story is amazing.
It is. Let's set the scene, because the contrast here is just staggering. Philip is in Samaria, and he is running this massively successful, highly visible ministry. Miracles are happening, the crowds are pouring in, the gospel is spreading like wildfire. By every single human metric of success, Philip is absolutely crushing it.
He's at the peak of his career.
And then suddenly, he gets a quiet directive to leave this thriving, fertile city and go walk down a dusty, empty, barren desert road going toward Gaza. There is no strategy, no roadmap, but wait, practically speaking, leaving a massive successful ministry for an empty road sounds incredibly irresponsible.
It does.
How do we square that with basic stewardship? I mean, if a leader did that today, their board of directors would fire them on the spot.
What's fascinating here is that the narrative forces us to look at kingdom economics versus human economics. The core principle demonstrated by Philip is that he obeyed before he understood.
Before he understood.
Right. He didn't pause to negotiate, he didn't ask for a 5-year business plan, and he certainly didn't demand a focus group to validate the move. He just started walking.
Wow.
Human instinct prefers the exact opposite. We demand clarity first, and only then will we offer our commitment. But Philip's readiness to move isn't portrayed as some manic impulsivity. It is the ultimate proof of his spiritual maturity. He had already built up that cultivated sensitivity we talked about. He knew the tone of the gentle whisper, so when the instruction came, even an illogical one, he didn't hesitate.
And because he moves, the story takes this incredible turn. Philip is out on this deserted road, and he happens upon a chariot. And inside is a high-ranking Ethiopian treasury official. This is a man with serious political and economic influence.
A very important guy.
Right. And this official has traveled to Jerusalem to worship and is sitting there reading the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, but he is completely confused by it. Then Philip gets a second quiet prompt. Go to that chariot and stay near it.
Just a simple prompt.
So Philip runs to the chariot, asks the man if he understands the text, and ends up invited inside. He explains how the ancient prophecy of the suffering servant points directly to Jesus. The official believes they pass a body of water right there in the desert, and Philip baptizes him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical implications of that single, seemingly irresponsible career move are staggering. Early Christian historians point out that this Ethiopian official took that message straight back to Africa.
Which is huge.
It's massive. The seeds planted in that one quiet conversation on a dusty road helped form the ancient Ethiopian Christian tradition. It carried the message across continents and massive cultural boundaries.
All from one walk down a dirt road.
Exactly. Philip could never have predicted that global impact. He just obeyed an instruction that made absolutely no strategic sense in the moment. God's kingdom impact heavily prioritizes the unseen over the immediately visible. A single act of obedience can multiply in ways we will never perceive in our lifetimes.
That is an amazing macro-level view, but let's bring it down to the micro-level for you, the listener. Philip clearly knew how to recognize that prompt. But if you are navigating a complex week, how do you know if an internal impression is actually from God and not just your own subconscious or maybe the spicy takeout you had for dinner last night?
The spicy takeout factor is real.
Right. The text provides 3 distinct filters. If alignment with Scripture is the baseline, what does it look like when we fail that test right out of the gate?
Well, the historical accounts give us glaring examples of what failure looks like. Look at Ananias and Sapphira in the early church. They attempted to frame a deeply deceptive, financially manipulative act in highly spiritual language.
Yeah, that didn't end well.
It did not. Or look at King Saul in the Old Testament, who completely rationalized his partial obedience when dealing with the Amalekites. He kept the best of the livestock and claimed he did it to sacrifice to God.
Spiritualizing a disobedience.
Precisely. The foundational rule, the first filter, is alignment with Scripture. God will never guide you in a way that contradicts his revealed word or his moral character. If an impulse encourages dishonesty, pride, manipulation, selfish ambition, or cutting ethical corners, it immediately fails the test. It is not from God, period.
No matter how strongly you feel it in your gut.
No matter how strong the feeling is.
That is a great safeguard. And that leads directly to the second filter, which is producing spiritual fruit.
Yes. If we look at Paul's framework in Galatians chapter 5, we know exactly what spiritual fruit looks like. It is going to cultivate Christ-like character, love, joy, peace, patience, humility. But the real danger here isn't usually the obvious glaring sins.
What is it then?
The danger is when a decision feels emotionally right to you, but it subtly fosters arrogance, coercion, or isolation. If a strong prompting makes you harsh, impatient, or creates a sense of superiority over other people, that is a massive red flag. True guidance doesn't manipulate or isolate. It shapes you to be more deeply loving, patient, and humble.
The third filter is wise counsel, and honestly, this might be the most countercultural one. We love the idea of the lone spiritual ranger, just me and God against the world.
It's a very modern Western idea.
It really is. But we aren't supposed to do this alone. The early church model, like the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15, proves this. When they hit a massive theological dispute, the leaders didn't retreat to their separate corners to wait for individual mystical visions. They gathered together.
They worked it out in community.
They argued, they prayed, they debated scripture, and they discerned as a community. It goes back to that proverb. With many advisors, they succeed.
Bringing other people into your discernment process is the ultimate safeguard against self-deception. When you take a prompting to trusted, spiritually mature mentors, they can spot the blind spots and the hidden motives that you are completely blind to.
They see what we can't.
Exactly. And there is a very specific emotional indicator that often accompanies guidance when it's affirmed by wise counsel. It is a deep sense of peace. Colossians chapter 3 talks about letting the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. God rarely leads through chaotic, frenzied anxiety. Even if the decision requires taking a massive risk, genuine guidance usually comes with an underlying, sustaining calm.
But doing that isn't exactly easy, is it?
Yeah.
Submitting your decisions to other people, risking rejection, making the hard choice, it requires a lot of sacrifice. And that completely clashes with our modern obsession with convenience.
It absolutely does clash. The tension between obedience and convenience is profound. Our culture elevates efficiency, predictability, and personal comfort above almost everything else. We want the easiest path with the highest return.
Of course we do.
But biblical obedience often demands the exact opposite. It calls for sacrifice over comfort. It's choosing to genuinely forgive a family member who caused you deep, lasting pain, even when holding the grudge feels safer. It's deciding to serve diligently in an unnoticed, unglamorous role at work or in your community, or having the courage to speak an uncomfortable truth when staying silent would keep the peace.
It is essentially building spiritual muscle memory. Just like an athlete training their reflexes, every time you respond to a small prompt, you strengthen your ability to hear the next one.
Yeah.
But building muscle requires tearing fibers. It physically hurts. It is rarely convenient. So what does this all mean?
That's the core of it.
It means we have to completely flip our expectations.
Yeah.
Clarity isn't a prerequisite for action. Clarity is the reward of action. We want the whole map before we take a step, but God usually only gives us enough light for the very next step.
That is the defining shift in perspective for anyone listening. You are committing to action first and trusting God with the outcome second. You aren't waiting for proof. And to help believers actually practice this, the source text gives us some incredibly practical tools to look at. We don't want to just leave you with abstract theology. You can start using these tools today to cultivate that spiritual sensitivity.
Yes, let's slow down here and translate this knowledge into actual application. The first tool is the obedience journal. Now, this isn't just a diary where you vent your feelings. It is a highly structured, weekly record designed to help you document and analyze exactly how God is working in your life.
It's a very deliberate practice.
Let's walk through what this actually looks like for you over the course of a week.
The obedience journal tracks 5 specific elements. Let's use a hypothetical scenario. Say you are at work and you feel a sudden nudge to reach out and apologize to a coworker for snapping at them in a meeting. Step 1 is the prompting. You write down exactly what you felt convicted to do.
Okay, got it.
Step 2 is your response. Be brutally honest here. Did you obey immediately, or did you sit at your desk for 3 days rationalizing why it was actually their fault?
I know which one I usually do. So you write down your hesitation. Then what?
Step 3 is relevant scripture. You note any biblical passages that inform that prompting. In this case, maybe it's the verse about leaving your gift at the altar and going to be reconciled with your brother first. Step 4 is counsel received. Did you text a mentor to ask if you should bring it up, or did you just act on it?
Right.
And finally, step 5 is the outcome and lessons. You write down what happened. Maybe it was incredibly awkward, but it cleared the air and salvaged the working relationship.
By tracking those 5 elements consistently, week after week, you start to see the matrix. You identify recurring patterns in how God uniquely guides you, how you typically resist, and how faithful He is when you finally act. It takes the mystical guesswork out of it and builds a documented history.
Exactly. And the second tool pairs perfectly with that. It is the decision discernment grid. Think of this as a diagnostic framework for evaluating major choices. When you have a massive decision sitting in front of you, you don't just guess. You run it through this grid of 5 questions.
Let's apply this to a real scenario. Let's say you, the listener, are offered a lucrative promotion, but it requires moving your family across the country and working 60-hour weeks. Question 1. Does this align with Scripture? Well, providing for your family is biblical, but so is being present for them.
Which brings us to the next step.
Right, so we move to question 2. What motives are influencing me right now? This one is tricky because we lie to ourselves all the time.
We do. Are you being driven by a genuine desire to use your gifts? Or are you being driven by ego, a need for status, or a fear of falling behind your peers? Question 3 forces you outside of your own head. What counsel have I received from mature believers?
And what if the counsel disagrees with what you want to do? What if your mentors say, this job seems like a recipe for burnout?
Then you have to take that incredibly seriously, which leads to question 4. What spiritual fruit might this decision produce? Look at the long-term trajectory. Will this move make you a more patient parent and a more generous neighbor? Or will the stress turn you into someone who is chronically exhausted and irritable?
The fruit is revealing.
And finally, question 5. Do I sense a deep peace through prayer regarding this path? Remember, peace isn't the absence of fear or the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of a deep, sustaining calm, even when facing a massive challenge.
By actively running your choices through that grid, Scripture, motives, counsel, fruit, and peace, you build a massive guardrail against those 2 extremes we talked about earlier. You won't be paralyzed by skepticism because you have a framework to make a decision. And you won't fall into impulsive spiritualization because the grid forces you to slow down and test your gut reactions.
It takes discernment from being a magical guessing game and turns it into a grounded relational discipline. It trains your heart and your mind to recognize that gentle whisper in the midst of all the modern noise.
To quickly recap the journey we've taken today, discernment is not a one-time event, and it is definitely not a formula you plug variables into. It is a lifelong practice of listening, testing your impressions against the Word and your community, and then courageously taking a step forward. You do not need to sit around waiting for the heavens to part or a bush to catch fire. You just need to act faithfully on the ordinary promptings in your everyday life.
This raises an important question, though. It's a profound concept regarding those times when you were doing everything right. You are seeking counsel, you are reading Scripture, and yet God remains completely silent.
Yeah, what about the silence?
What if a season of profound spiritual silence isn't a sign that you have lost your way or that you somehow lack guidance? What if, instead, silence is an intentional invitation to simply remain faithful in what you already know? What if it is a call to trust God for His presence rather than constantly demanding new directions and new marching orders from Him?
Wow. What if silence is just an invitation to keep walking in the light you already have? That is a beautiful, challenging thought. We want to leave you to mull that over on your own this week. If you were in a season of silence right now, maybe the call is simply faithfulness to the last thing you knew to be true. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you navigate your career, your relationships, and your daily habits this week, we encourage you to look for the extraordinary within the ordinary moments. Keep listening, keep testing, and keep walking.